Have you ever noticed how a single thought can quietly take control of your entire day? It starts small, almost invisible, a doubt, a memory, a fear. And before you realize it, that thought grows roots, wrapping itself around your mind, draining your energy, stealing your peace. You try to ignore it, distract yourself, scroll, talk, work, but it keeps coming back, louder each time. What if I told you that the problem is not the thought itself, but the way you relate to it? Rumi, the 13th century poet and mystic, once suggested something deeply unsettling yet liberating. Your thoughts are not who you are. And the moment you truly understand this, everything begins to change. Imagine your mind as a vast open sky. Thoughts are like clouds passing through it. Some are light and gentle, others dark and heavy, filled with storms. But here is the truth most people never realize. The sky is never harmed by the clouds. No matter how intense the storm becomes, the sky remains untouched, vast, and free. In the same way, your awareness, the deepest part of you, is never damaged by your thoughts. Yet most of us don't live as the sky. We live as the clouds. We become the storm. Rumi would say that the moment you identify with a negative thought, you give it power. You feed it your attention, your belief, your energy, and slowly it begins to define your reality. A simple thought like, "I'm not good enough," becomes a story. That story becomes a feeling. That feeling becomes a state of being. And before long, you are no longer observing the thought, you are living inside it. But what if you could step back? What if, instead of fighting the thought or believing it, you simply watched it? This is where everything shifts, because trying to control your thoughts directly is like trying to stop the wind with your hands. The more you struggle, the more exhausted you become. Rumi didn't teach control through force, he taught awareness through presence. He understood that the mind produces thoughts, just like the heart beats or the lungs breathe. It is natural. It is automatic. The problem begins when you take every thought seriously, as if each one were a command, a truth, or a reflection of reality. Think about it. If every thought you had were true, your life would be chaos. One moment you feel confident, the next moment insecure. One moment hopeful, the next afraid. Thoughts contradict each other constantly. So why do we choose to believe the negative ones so easily? Why do we cling to the voices that hurt us the most? Rumi would say it is because we have forgotten our true nature. We have forgotten that we are the observer, not the voice. There is a quiet space within you, a place that exists before any thought appears. You may have felt it in rare moments, when you are watching a sunset, listening to music, or simply sitting in silence. For a brief second, the mind becomes still, and there is peace. That peace is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It has always been there, hidden beneath the noise of constant thinking. Negative thoughts don't destroy that peace, they only distract you from it. Now, here is the part that changes everything. You don't need to eliminate negative thoughts to feel peace. Read that again. You don't need to win the battle in your mind. In fact, the battle itself is what keeps you trapped. Because every time you resist a thought, you give it importance. You treat it as something that must be defeated. And in doing so, you keep your attention locked onto it. Rumi invites you to do something radically different, to allow the thought to exist without giving it your identity. Picture yourself sitting by a river, watching leaves float by on the surface of the water. Each leaf represents a thought. Some are beautiful, others disturbing. But you don't jump into the river to chase them. You don't try to stop the flow. You simply watch. The thoughts come and they go. And as you continue to observe, something incredible begins to happen. The thoughts lose their weight. They lose their urgency. They become just movements, passing events, not truths. But this is not easy at first, because your mind has been conditioned for years, maybe your entire life, to react automatically. A negative thought appears, and instantly you believe it. Analyze it, expand it. It becomes a chain reaction. And breaking that pattern requires something simple yet powerful: awareness in the present moment. Not tomorrow, not later, now. The next time a negative thought arises, instead of saying, "This is me," or "This is true," gently say to yourself, "This is just a thought." That small shift creates distance, and in that distance, there is freedom, because you begin to see that thoughts are temporary. They rise, they peak, and they dissolve. No thought, no matter how intense, can last forever unless you keep feeding it. And most of the time, what feeds a thought is not reality, but your attention. Where attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, thoughts grow stronger. Rumi often spoke about the idea of being a guest house, where every emotion, every thought, every experience is welcomed, not resisted. This doesn't mean you enjoy negative thoughts or that you agree with them. It means you stop fighting their presence. You allow them to enter, knowing they will eventually leave, because everything that arises passes. And the more you understand this deeply, not just intellectually, but through direct experience, the less control your thoughts have over you. At first, you might notice that your mind resists this approach. It may tell you that if you don't control your thoughts, things will get worse, that you need to fix, analyze, or solve every negative idea. But this is just another thought, another voice trying to maintain control. And the moment you see it for what it is, it begins to lose its grip. Little by little, as you practice observing instead of reacting, something subtle begins to change inside you. The space between you and your thoughts becomes wider. What once felt overwhelming now feels distant. What once controlled your emotions now feels like background noise. And in that space, something else starts to emerge, a sense of calm, not because your thoughts disappeared, but because you were no longer lost inside them. And as that calm begins to grow, you start to realize something that once seemed impossible. Peace is not the absence of noise, it is the absence of attachment. The mind can still be active, thoughts can still appear, but they no longer define your inner state. They pass through you like echoes in a vast canyon, heard but not held. At this stage, something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to notice the gap between a thought appearing and your reaction to it. Before, this process felt instantaneous. A thought came and you were already inside it. Now there is a pause, a moment of awareness, and inside that pause lies your freedom. Because in that space you can choose, not by force, not by suppression, but by understanding. Rumi often hinted that the mind is like a storyteller, endlessly weaving narratives out of fragments of memory, fear, and imagination. And the problem is not that the mind tells stories. The problem is that we forget they are stories. A single negative thought can quickly turn into a detailed scenario. Something will go wrong, people will judge you, you will fail, things will fall apart. None of it has happened, yet your body reacts as if it were real. Your heart rate changes, your breathing shifts, your mood darkens, all because of a story. But when you begin to observe the mind, you start to catch the story in its early stages. You see how one small thought tries to recruit others, building a chain. And instead of following it unconsciously, you simply watch the process unfold. This is where the illusion begins to break, because a story that is seen clearly loses its power to deceive. There is another layer to this practice that many people overlook. It is not only about observing thoughts, but also about feeling without resistance. Because negative thoughts are often tied to emotions, and sometimes what keeps a thought alive is not the thought itself, but the feeling underneath it. Fear, sadness, insecurity, these emotions seek attention, and when they are ignored or suppressed, they return through thoughts again and again. Rumi's wisdom invites you to turn toward these feelings, not away from them. to sit with them without labeling them as good or bad, to allow them to be present just as they are. This might feel uncomfortable at first. Your instinct may be to escape, distract, or fix. But if you stay, if you allow the feeling to exist without resistance, something unexpected happens. The emotion begins to soften, not because you forced it to change, but because you stopped feeding it with fear and avoidance. Think of it like holding a knot too tightly. The harder you pull, the tighter it becomes. But when you loosen your grip, the knot naturally begins to unravel. In the same way, your inner tension is often maintained by your resistance to it. When that resistance fades, the tension has nothing left to hold on to. As you continue this practice, you may start to notice patterns that were invisible before. Certain thoughts repeat themselves. Certain triggers bring the same emotional reactions. It may feel as if your mind is replaying old recordings. And in many ways, it is. Much of what we call thinking is simply conditioning, learned responses from past experiences. Rumi would remind you that you are not bound to these patterns, even if they feel deeply ingrained. Awareness itself is the beginning of transformation. Because once you see a pattern clearly, you are no longer completely inside it. You are standing outside, observing, and from that place, the pattern begins to lose its automatic power.
But there is an important shift that must happen here. This is not about trying to become a perfect thinker or eliminating all negativity from your mind. That goal in itself creates more tension. It turns awareness into another form of control. Instead, this is about changing your relationship with your thoughts entirely, from identification to observation, from resistance to allowance, from unconscious reaction to conscious presence. And in that shift, something deeper begins to reveal itself. You start to sense that your identity is not tied to the content of your mind. The voice in your head is not who you are. It is something you can hear. And if you can hear it, it means there is a part of you that exists beyond it, a quieter presence, one that does not judge, does not rush, does not cling. This presence is what Rumi pointed to again and again, not as a concept to understand, but as a reality to experience. It is the part of you that remains unchanged, no matter what thoughts come and go. The part that is still here, even when your mind is busy, even when emotions rise and fall. And the more you rest in this awareness, the less compelling your negative thoughts become. You may still hear them, they may still arise unexpectedly, but they no longer pull you in the same way. It is like watching a familiar movie, one that used to make you emotional, but now you can see it for what it is, a sequence of images, a constructed narrative. And because you see it clearly, you are no longer lost in it. However, there is one final layer that often keeps people stuck, even when they begin to understand all of this. It is the subtle desire to get rid of negative thoughts permanently, the belief that peace will only come when the mind is completely silent. But this belief creates a hidden resistance, a quiet tension that keeps the cycle alive. Because the mind is not meant to be silent all the time. It is meant to function, to think, to create. The goal is not silence, it is freedom. Freedom from being controlled by every thought that appears. Freedom from believing that every negative idea defines you. Freedom to experience life directly, without the constant filter of fear and judgment. And as this understanding deepens, you begin to notice something almost paradoxical. The less you try to control your thoughts, the quieter they become. The less importance you give to negativity, the less frequently it dominates your mind. Not because you forced it away, but because you stopped feeding it. At this point, you may start to feel a new kind of stability emerging within you. Not a rigid control, but a flexible awareness. A sense that no matter what thought arises, you have the capacity to observe it, to allow it, and to let it pass. And this realization changes the way you experience even the most challenging moments. Because now, when a negative thought appears, it is no longer a threat, it is simply an event. Something that comes and something that will go. And in that understanding, there is a quiet confidence, a grounded sense of being that does not depend on the constant management of your mind. And from that grounded sense of being, a different way of living begins to unfold. You are no longer at the mercy of every passing thought, no longer pulled in 1,000 directions by the noise of the mind. Instead, you move through life with a quiet awareness, like someone who has finally stepped out of a crowded room and into open air. The noise may still exist somewhere in the background, but it no longer surrounds you. In this space, you begin to experience moments more directly. A conversation feels clearer. A simple walk feels deeper. Even silence, something that once may have felt uncomfortable, now feels full, alive. This is the peace that Rumi pointed toward. Not something distant or mystical, but something deeply present. Something that reveals itself when you are no longer entangled in the constant stream of thought. And yet, life will still bring challenges. There will still be moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. Negative thoughts will still arise, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes intensely. But now there is a difference. You no longer see them as enemies. You no longer see them as truths. You see them as movements within the mind. Temporary, passing, and ultimately powerless unless you choose to hold on to them. This understanding gives you a kind of inner resilience that cannot be shaken easily. Not because you have eliminated negativity, but because you have changed your relationship with it. You have learned to stand as the observer, the one who notices, the one who allows, the one who remains untouched beneath it all. And in doing so, you reclaim something that was always yours, your peace.
Rumi once expressed that what you are seeking is already within you, quietly waiting to be recognized. And perhaps this is the most important realization of all. You are not trying to become peaceful. You are uncovering the peace that has always been there. Beneath the layers of thought, beneath the patterns, beneath the noise, there is a stillness that has never been disturbed. The more you return to this awareness again and again, the more natural it becomes. At first, it may feel like a practice, something you have to remember to do, but over time, it becomes a way of being. You start to notice your thoughts without effort. You start to let go without struggle. You start to live with a sense of openness that was once hidden behind tension and control. And something else begins to change as well, the way you see yourself and the way you see others. Because once you understand your own mind, you begin to recognize that others are also caught in their own thoughts, their own fears, their own stories. And instead of reacting with judgment, you begin to respond with a quiet compassion, not as an idea, but as a natural expression of your awareness. This is where inner peace extends beyond you. It begins to shape your actions, your words, your presence in the world. It influences how you listen, how you speak, how you connect. And without even trying, you become a source of calm in environments that once felt overwhelming, not because you are perfect, but because you are no longer fighting what is. So the next time a negative thought arises, remember this: you don't need to chase it away, you don't need to argue with it, and you don't need to believe it. You can simply notice it, allow it, and let it pass, like a cloud in the sky, like a leaf on the river, like a story that no longer holds your attention. And in that simple act of awareness, you return to yourself. If this message resonated with you, if you felt even a small shift while listening, then you are already on the path. This is not something reserved for a few. It is something available to anyone willing to observe, to allow, and to be present. And the more we share this understanding, the more we create a space where others can also find that same clarity and peace. So if you want to keep exploring ideas like this, to deepen your awareness and grow together as a community, make sure to subscribe. Give this video a like so more people can discover it, and share it with someone who might need to hear this today, because sometimes a single message at the right moment can change everything.